Hello, this is my video of shading a sempervivum, which is a matte forming alpine perennial plant which tolerates coastal conditions, and the leaves are very fleshy and smooth. And notice also the very ordered radial pattern, how they are sort of clustered around each other. So what I've done first of all is draw them out, each of the leaves, to make sure I've got the pattern right, because that's quite important, in the same way that you would if you were doing a rose or indeed any other flower. And what I'm doing here, as you can see, is using the Faber Castell pencils HBB and 2B to try and get some depth and graduation behind that particular leaf. And I'll go back a little bit later in the video and also go back and add a little bit more depth around each of the leaves subsequently. So at the moment I'm just trying to get something in, so I'm starting with HB, and then I put in a bit more pressure with B, and then come to 2B, and then you graduate out so that it really looks as if that leaf is standing out. So make sure you've got very, very sharp pencils so that you can really get the precision that you need around the edge of that leaf. Okay, so now we're coming on to the leaf itself, and around the edge, as I say, they're quite fleshy and on the actual leaf itself, around the side, I have used H and HB, and you'll see me going in a minute to pick that bit up on the side of the leaf. But at the moment still using 2B just to get that little bit of depth around, because the reason is, if you can put the depth in first of all, it gives you a much better idea of where else you're going and what you're actually going to do on the leaf. Get your darkest tones in, leave the leaf as white as possible in the middle part, because that is actually quite light, and then I'll talk you through how we build up those patterns and textures on the actual leaf itself a little bit further on. So now we're coming to the side of the leaf. So there's a highlight in the middle here, so I'm going to leave the paper white, and as I say, here I'm using H and HB. So there you go, you can see I'm leaving that little bit white in the middle, because they're quite thick, these leaves. They're quite, as I say, quite fleshy. So you do, if you can, you also want to try and get a little bit of graduation on the leaf edge itself up onto the side of the leaf so that it looks round. So you'll be doing graduating away from the leaf onto the leaf underneath next to it, but also up onto that individual leaf as well. So you're talking about quite a small area. This drawing is about, what, 4 inches by 4 inches, so not terribly big. So you want a very sharp pencil and quite a lot of control. You can also, of course, if you haven't left the white, or you've maybe shaded over and you should have left more white paper showing through for the highlight, you could go back in with a pointed tip eraser to take that out, and that would work as well. Now for doing the pattern on the side of the leaf, I'm using a mixture of techniques. I'm using, you'll notice, have a close look and you'll notice that I'm going to be using the pencil on the side to pick up the paper tooths. I'm also putting in just basic shading, particularly in this bit because we're still around the edge of it, which is like just smooth hatching, like you would do if you were shading skin, and just like you do when you're doing other plants. And you can use a tortillon as well to blend out strokes and to smooth, because you do want this to be, this, as I say, this is quite fleshy, it's quite smooth, so you don't really want to have texture where you don't want it. So now we're working on the section on that leaf. If you look at your handout and look at the second page, top right, and you will see it's marked with a B on that leaf. So I'm using a mixture of HB and B. You could use something softer if you wanted to, but you will get more texture if you do that. So I'm trying to err on the side of caution, just to get a feeling of texture there. That's a much better technique than just purely going in and squircling or dotting. We are going to be doing a bit of that, but if you use the side of the pencil and use the tooth paper, it gives you such a good effect. And then you can cross hatch over the top as well, just to cover a bigger area and smooth out some of the strokes that you've done. So you may find that that's enough, and then you don't need to work into it anymore and go into it with your squircling or your dotting, because it might, as I say, it might just be sufficient. So I think that's basically something to bear in mind whenever you're drawing anything that has got any texture to it. Always your first go-to technique will be using a pencil on the side, but remember, to get the texture that you want to bring up the tooth of the paper, you need to be using from HB and softer. And the softer the pencil is, the more graphite content, and therefore the more tooth and the more texture will show up. Try it with your pencils. Try it with between an HB, use the pencil on the side on another sheet of paper, see how much texture you get when you use an HB on the side, and then somewhere next to it try using something like, I don't know, you could go up to 5B or 6B or something, use that on the side, go fairly lightly, because we're not using it for its depth, we're using it for its texture, how it appears. And you should see quite a marked difference between the two, and it's always a really good useful technique. A lot of these photorealistic techniques take forever and a day to do, so if you can do something which helps you along the way, go for it. So you can see there the texture that I've got, quite a nice texture down there. So, you know, that's fine. We're going to go back and work into it. It's not finished yet, but it's you know, it's given me something that I can work with, and that's what I need at the moment. Notice I have still left the majority of the leaf, the background of the leaf, white, because again, for the same reason, I want to start putting the darks and the mid-tones and all the textures and everything else in, so that then I've got a better idea of what to do when I go in on the lighter part. And if you look at the photograph that you've got on your handout, you can see it's a sort of very pale, sort of greeny, browny green on the edges, and in the middle it's actually a very sort of pale grey to white, so you don't really want that much on there yet on the white area. So there are a few sort of little lines along there as well, so I'm just going along very lightly with my HB there, just sort of carefully picking up a bit. And now you can see, as I said, you do your dotting and your swirling on top of the texture that you've achieved by using the side of the pencil. So as I say, there may be areas where you don't need to do that, and it's fine what you've done already, but this will just allow you to get a little bit more detail. and that was a Tombow mono eraser I used just to take out a few little lighter areas. So this is a very, very fine squircling, going in with the point of the pencil, moving it around very, very closely. You don't want to do too big or cover too big an area at a time when you're doing this, because it will look too contrived. You're trying to make it look natural, remember, so make sure that your strokes are really, really close together and built up. And I've also altered my pressure there, so you can see there's now quite a little bit more depth on there, and I'm using B to do that. Again, dotting, a little bit of squircling. So now you can start to see that it's kind of coming together, and now we've got a little bit more done on the inner leaf. It's kind of supporting around the edge there, where you can see it's starting to look even more round, because I've got that graduation in, and now that's backed up by what's done on the other side. You can use a tortillon as well if you think some of your lines are looking a bit stark and you just want to smooth it out a little bit. A tortillon is really, really good for that. Incidentally, you can order tortillons and stumps online. I usually get mine from Jackson's Art Supplies, and I have given you a list of where you can get supplies on your course details, because obviously you would usually get those from me. And you can still use pointed tip eraser. Take out a few highlights. And this is H, just coming in, just doing a little bit more shading. And then darkening up around the edge, because you very rarely finish one bit and then that's it. You don't go back to it. You, as you'll probably know by now, doing this is an ongoing process which does need constant renewal, constant tweaking. So at the top of that leaf, you've got the shadow from the leaf above it, so I'm using H to do that. Just put a little bit more pressure in with the H. I don't want to go too far there, because remember the leaf underneath that is quite light in that area. Okay, and now we could start shading the lighter area, which, as I said, was very, very light. So I'm using a 3H. You could use a 4H if you want to, just to get a little bit of shading on there, just to get something, because it isn't completely one tone. There is a little bit of shade on there. So again, use a stump or use a tortillon just to sort of blend it out a little bit. And there you go, sempervivum.